My name is Martin Cox, and this is my capstone project. In literature, authors use a variety of literary devices and writing techniques to convey a message. The messages, of course, vary depending on what the author has decided upon. Of the literature I've read in this course, I noticed authors use a theme or a message of poverty within their writing. I realized that combining the theme of poverty into the author's stories, the authors have contributed to a better understanding of the effect of poverty upon worldwide cultures. I'm going to jump right in with the short story from Latin America called A Very Old Man with Enormous Wings by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. The story centers around an old man and how his presence affects his family. I feel there are several themes that the author uses in this story, including poverty. I feel that the author's use of satire, magical realism, symbolism, imagery, and allegory and tone are literary devices he used to bring depth to it. Marquez paints a bleak picture of the lives of this family. The second story I read, The Lady Knight Errant, in the first sentence of this story, we know that a man named Ku is poor because the author tells us that Ku comes from a poor family in Chinling. He and his mother lived in a poor section of town because he told that an empty house was across from Ku's house. And when people moved, they were described as not having a lot of food and having to ask for rice from Ku since a girl and a mother had not eaten for an entire day. Another literary device that projects the theme of poverty in this story is mood. The story comes across as dark and sad. I feel this is done on a purpose to tell the reader that living in poverty is very hard. Poverty can make people sad and depressed, and this comes across in this story. The one saving grace for Ku is the Lady Knight Errant bestowed the act of kindness of giving him a child. She does this for possibly 1 to 2 reasons. Either way, it is one bright spot in the story and is a bright spot in Ku's life of poverty. The third selection I chose was from Africa, and it was the Nelson Mandela Nobel Prize speech he gave in 1993. His entire speech, he talks about poverty and the struggles of it. He also mentions the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. and the civil rights in America that he says were issues the South Americans face too. The main literary device Mandela uses in this speech is imagery. An author uses imagery to add descriptive language to their writing, which helps add depth to the written piece. Imagery appeals to the human senses to bring out the reader's emotions. My fourth and final selection is Rashomon from Japan. This story, like many others, was very dark in nature, which helps the reader see poverty as a dark and an unforgiving thing. The author uses different literary devices and techniques to portray the problems and issues that that living in poverty can create. Imagery, mood, and symbolisms are the devices and techniques used to intertwine the theme of poverty in this story. What I consider to be the most important example of symbolism is that of the main character Roshaman. I think Roshaman represents the condition of poverty and all the difficult decisions that are many are forced to make when poor. Even the rain can be a symbol for the dark and depressing life of poverty. The story tells the servant walking to one of the gates of the city and goes inside. The tower is all corroded and is kept unclean. Here's where the author uses a simile to say that flying crows are like when the sky overturned red in the afterlife of the departed sun. They look so many grains of sesame flung across the gate. He hears a noise and finds out an old woman is removing hair from dead bodies. He is disgusted at first, but then knows that the woman is only doing this to survive. So after hating the woman for being a thief, he becomes a thief himself by stealing her clothes. Being poor in a starving city has left the servant no other choice. I've always known that poverty is a social issue throughout the world. After reading these four writings and realizing that they came from different countries around the world, I learned more about the similarities and differences of how poverty affects different cultures. But there is more to a story than just techniques of writing. It's finding out why the author wrote the story and the way he or she did. The story is the author. What is the story? What story is the author really trying to tell? It is just a fictional story to entertain readers, or is it the author trying to get readers to understand poverty or any topic? We look at the way the author wrote the story to answer that. If the story is funny and silly, maybe the author just wants to entertain us, to make us laugh and be happy. But perhaps the author is trying to persuade us to see a topic through another viewpoint. This is what I feel a common thread in the four writings I've read. A common theme is poverty in all four writings, but I don't think the authors are just wanting the readers to admit that there is poverty in the world. I think the authors are trying to open the eyes of the readers to understand the depth that poverty reaches into a person's life, but also into the entire culture and ultimately throughout the world. Using the theme of poverty, the authors use these four works and are wanting the readers to see poverty through another set of eyes, the eyes of the characters in the stories, which really can be the eyes of the authors, but also the eyes of those who are actually living in poverty. I know that all four of these authors did a really fantastic job at painting the picture of sadness of poverty. I think that authors are using styles of writing to tell the world that poverty makes many shapes and forms, but it's the same in how it destroys lives and influences entire nations. It shows how poverty can be used to control people, how it can cause hate and mistrust of people and the governments.